One
Wait, what's going on with the battery?
battery gone.
No, it's not. I have no what the fuck is this? It's just shitting itself.
Yeah, copy Max.
Hello, everybody, and welcome to Sandbaggers. We are here for the 2022 Formula One season, among other things. But right now we have a F1 testing and race to cover. My name is John Reed. I am the person who is talking right now.
Hi, I'm Wary, the person who's talking right now.
I'm Anthony. I'm the person who's talking right now. I'm English, so apologies.
Don't worry, I'm French. It's even worse.
Yes, I have gone from being in the majority to being in the minority now.
This is now the Eurozone. Be prepared to have all your
Yeah.
money taken.
We're gonna talk about Newcastle and Lille and I don't know, fucking St. Pauli.
Yeah, this is now a football podcast. Okay. Cars. I believe we're here to talk about cars.
We are here to talk about cars. Do we want to start with the preseason moves, gentlemen?
I actually just want to do a quick roundup of other stuff that happened this weekend. Because I think there's like a couple of interesting stuff.
If you mean two, I think we can cover that within the show. But yeah, other stuff, sure.
Yeah. No, yeah. I mean, I just want to say commiseration to Antonio Giovinazzi, who is now gone from, back of the grid but still competent driver to the worst driver in Formula E. That's rough. F in the chats for poor old Gio.
Rip, Gio, you were definitely here.
So he will definitely go down in the history books as an F1 driver, Antonio Giovinazzi. That's pretty much it, really. He drove around the back of the grid during some fun races.
Since Rocket is not here, I will just be quickly stating that NASCAR is fun and interesting again, not because of like any drivers or that it has removed the systematic racism from its sport, but they have wheels that literally shear themselves apart. So it's always fun to watch a race when that happens.
Yeah, wheels off, which is kind of a trend, I guess, this year, even in other series.
I was watching. I know it's not exactly sort of pertinent to the F1 stuff, but I think we were watching the. I think it was the Daytona 500, or it might have been the 24 hours of Daytona, and at least 3 times during that race there was just a wheel. Like the camera would just cut, and there was just a wheel off on its own on
That was the
adventures.
500.
It's such good shit.
Other than this, IndyCar, boring. I'm sorry, Americans trying to hype this up, but there's a lot of guys we love that are IndyCar now. But I mean, if you want to see a McLaren go fast this year, yeah, sure, you can watch IndyCar. But other than this, like, I tried the Texas race and I just don't remember anything.
Well, that's an oval. You can't watch the oval races. Those are boring as fuck.
Yeah, generally good rule that all oval races, all forms of oval racing, fucking suck unless it's like dirt ovals or like those fucking like or bikes on dirt ovals is a thing, which is always mental. Those are always worth a watch. But
very English, I think.
Yes, it's like a podunk fucking English town thing to just have like an oval dirt track with people on bikes, and it's always an absolute mess, and there's never like a finish where people don't have several broken bones because it is as dangerous as it sounds.
No, yeah, nobody watches NASCAR for the actual racing. They watch it for the big one. Pretty much same with IndyCar ovals.
I actually watch NASCAR for like the sponsors. Like it's like the Super Bowl. Like I don't watch it for the football. I watch it for the ads. Like NASCAR is the same thing. Like you're gonna have the Liberty University car. You're gonna have the Fox Nation car. You're gonna have the NRA car. That rules. That's a slice of Americana, right?
Black Rifle coffee. Woo!
Yeah, you forgot about everyone's favorite Black Rifle coffee car. Oh, what else do we have?
That was it. I
Uh,
think. I think that's. I think,
There
I
was
think I think that's the worst one. Of course, the Menard car, driven by Paul Menard, son of lumber and construction tool mogul John Menard. I fucking hate John Menard. I worked for him for like 3 years. Sucks.
fucking
Horrible
rip.
person.
I mean, there was also Sebring this weekend. I watched the end of the WEC race, which was interrupted by Florida and some like storm warnings. And I guess apparently in Florida, you have to stop the race when there's a storm going. So, yeah, they had to do this like half an hour, I think, before the time ran out. And so that race finished in the pits with Alpine winning their first ever hypercar race with a car that is literally like an old LMP1 that it just brought up to spec.
Yeah,
So
I was gonna say, aren't the Alpine cars not even like really hyper cars? They're just kind of like, because I've been watching Le Mans last year, and that's what they kept saying. They're like, "Oh look, I know Toyota's running away with it, and Alpine don't look very good, but that's because their car's not a hyper car. It's just an LMP1 car that they've kind of modified a bit, or LMP2
yeah,
car. I think even it might have been. Yeah,
and despite all the best efforts from like the FIA and WEC to just like ruin Toyota with like battery restrictions and stuff like this, they just ended up crashing. So
I
there you
did
go.
see the clip of the Toyota going into a corner, and I think the tire popped or something, and it from the sort of chase camera, it just looked like the car just drove into a fucking wall, which looked quite funny. But yeah, that looked interesting. I didn't catch it because I was busy molding over several football results so over the weekend, and crying about McLaren being slow at Bahrain. But we'll get onto that.
Speaking of crying, Mark Marquez has once again also crashed himself in
Rip.
in MotoGP. He apparently has some sort of eye issue now,
Oh
like double
Jesus!
vision. So he's
Yeah,
going to be out indefinitely.
apparently something he had before. I really don't.
I
So
c-
I don't know shit about MotoGP, but since MotoGP has a French world champion, and I'm watching F1 on the same channel that has MotoGP, I am bombarded with MotoGP stuff that I'm trying, but I ended up watching the race this weekend, and it was cool because seeing Fabio Quartararo like suddenly finding absolute pace in the middle of this very wet, weird circuit. Uh, that was fun to watch, but I still don't care. Too many Italians.
yeah, it should be said right now. This podcast is anti-Italian.
Yep.
Which is gonna be weird in a few minutes, but fine.
And the Italian asterisk unless they're fucking Red Bull. That's my rule.
Yeah, but we should probably get into it, eh?
Yeah, F1 is back, baby.
Yeah, so let's go over the whole preseason bullshit. So it, I think we got to start with everyone's favorite French constructor. Alpine had a bit of a dumpster fire with the way they let go of their quote unquote team principal, Martin Bukowski. I do love it because at the team photo in Abu Dhabi last year, you can see Budkowski just sitting down and he has his hands on his knees and he's just flipping off the camera.
Yeah, because there was the whole thing. I'm sorry, but there's this whole thing about the MotoGP guy who came last year. I forgot his name already. Some Italian, so we don't care.
Lauren Rossi.
Yeah. But yeah, that I thought that they were going, in this direction since Cyril left. Of just like, all right, Bukowski kind of like the pitfall on track guy, and Rossi as kind of more of a like big picture guy.
Well, their quote unquote plan for team leadership was to have both of them serve in like a dual role with no exact team principal. I believe Budkowski was the head of technical design, and then Laurent Rossi was supposed to handle everything else. But clearly, Rossi just kind of stepped over Budkowski's toes, and they gave him the can at the end of the year. Which, by the way, I did predict that would be a dumpster fire and end horribly, and it has. So I just want
Yeah,
to take credit for that.
yeah. It was always an interesting situation down there, and it is a shame because El Plan, it's kind of worked, but it's not really been as much as everybody kind of thought it was going to be. And the cars are fucking ugly as shit. So there's that. They brought Best Water Treatment, which is also one of the worst names of any company in the world, back into the sport with their hideous fucking cars. They look worse than it ever did on Force India and Racing Point.
I just
Um,
want to say Martin Brundle also rated that as the one of the best liveries this year.
Martin Brundle is senile.
Yeah, I was going to say like that's not an endorsement. That's actually like proves that this car is ugly.
I liked the. I think it ended up being a concept a concept somebody had made online, and it was a combination of the dark blue and the pink. That I liked a lot, but what they've actually done is poor.
It looks like a NASCAR livery on an F1 car, and NASCAR liveries already look horrible on NASCARs.
It's gonna be sponsored by the Front National next year. It's gonna roll.
Oh god,
It's going to be great.
instead of at the end of last season when they had El Plan on the back of the spoiler, it's just going to say Le Pen. But
Oh god.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, but it's a shame as well because last year's Alpine was I think a gorgeous car. Like the black with the sort of like dark blue kind of going into a lighter blue at the end, and
yeah, it
like
looked really good.
I'm
I,
not patriotic at all, but I do like a nice French flag motif at the end. That was like a very good touch. But they decided to ruin it and put pink and not the even a good shade of pink. Because
not
like give me a dark pink, give me a pale pink, not this neon bullshit.
not to derail the conversation, but I think a lot of teams have just done very poor with their liveries this year, among some other things for
Yeah.
some of those teams.
I was just about to say, speaking of neon bullshit, Aston Martin and McLaren, their liveries are pretty bad this season. So,
Okay, I've
Well,
told you this before. I actually enjoy the color of the McLaren, the like baby blue and the orange.
the
yeah,
the
but it's the ratio. It's like because it worked very well last year because it was just like, all right, here's a bunch of orange with a little bit of blue to just like
and
pump it up.
and like the black is so out of place on the kind of back third of the car. It looks so wrong, and the sponsors are just in the wrong places. Like it's essentially the you're right. The orange and the blue is pretty much the same as the colors they ran for the Gulf scheme at Monaco last year, and that was one of the best looking F1 cars in a very long time. But they've just got the proportions wrong.
Also, black lines.
Yeah,
You gotta add some black lines in
yeah,
there.
yeah. There's no barriers, and it's just horrific. I mean, the original livery was pretty bad, but when they added the extra kind of black on the rear intake to accommodate the Google sponsor, it's just horrible.
Yeah,
Yeah,
it's bad.
and it makes the car go slower
Yeah.
as they install chrome on the car, and for some reason now it's slower.
Yeah, to reel it back in though. So Alpine, they had that bit of a hiccup in the off season, and then a couple of weeks later, it was released that Otmar Zafnauer, Detroit native, very much the Racing Point Force India frontman, was leaving Aston Martin because of some disagreements with Papa Stroll, and he was going to go to Alpine to attempt to fix them up.
Yeah, and it's unconfirmed, but there has been plenty of rumors going around that Papa Stroll has been hands-on in a fairly unhelpful way, particularly during the development of this year's car, which, yeah, I mean, kind of looks like it. So I don't blame Snaffer, Otmar for leaving and going to a team that on the surface is a bit of a clusterfuck, but you could probably get the reins of much easier than you can when you're having to fight the guy who owns the team on literally everything.
I mean, for the most part, that team has been since the days of Eddie Jordan, just looking to be this sort of happy-go-lucky, no pressure team where it's like, okay, we have no money, but what we do have is a bunch of team spirit, a bunch of technical knowledge. So if we put everything together, we can't fight for wins, but we can definitely punch above our weight. That's basically been that team for a long time. The only problem that they have now is that Stroll has come in, just spent money and basically said, fuck you, we're going to play it my way.
And also, I think like you still see the like remnants of the entire like pink Mercedes thing, where like I think it hurts Stroll's ego to a point that like rather than just be a money man and just say like, all right, here's my son, here's a bunch of money, do your thing. He's not gonna be the asshole that's gonna show up in the meeting and says like, all right, this looks good, but can you make it go like just a little bit faster? Like remove this, change this. And it's just like that's gonna kill a team.
The car is slow. It cannot be my son. It's not my son's fault. You must make the car quicker for my son. You know,
They
and you
have
just got Seb crying in the corner as as he just sort of watches this whole thing unfold, thinking he'd came to a new team and was going to do well, and it's just so sad.
yeah, they have a lot of issues that we will get into, but
With
they will definitely need to
with
figure out. On to the next news that we have. We have, is Lewis Hamilton going to
oh
retire?
god,
Will he be there? He hasn't spoken for a while. No, he's here. He's here. He's fine.
yeah.
Nothing's
the
happened.
man just went on a break. That's it. like you know, you can take a break from social media and come back when you have to do your job. It's calling it like you go on holiday, you do your thing. Like you know, like we nothing happened in Abu Dhabi last year. I think
Yeah, I
I
mean
don't.
that is rule number 2 of this podcast. You know, rule number 1 is Nick De Vries is sad. Rule number 2 is nothing happened in Abu Dhabi.
Michael Massey got fired because he almost killed Lando Norris.
Yeah,
Yeah,
that's what I choose to believe. He got fired because he nearly killed Lando Norris and other assorted bullshit throughout the season, but nothing happened in the desert.
yeah. Who cares about Abu Dhabi anyway? That's like the worst track. It's never been a championship decider. You know, like who cares?
Yeah, in the words of Kimi Räikkönen, the first couple of corners are okay, the rest is shit.
We miss Kimi.
So
Yeah, I do miss Kimi. Sorry to interrupt there, Reed, but yeah, I just want to say this now. I am already missing Kimi. See, like not having an old, angry, tired man wheeling a shit box around the back of the field is unfortunate, but we never know. Seb might be Kimi this season. The car's bad
Seb
enough.
is the new Kimmy, or Danny Rick is the new Kimmy.
Oh, that hurts to
No,
hear.
don't say that. Ow.
We're getting ahead of ourselves though, so we should just continue. We have announcements of a new team. Michael Andretti, son of legend
USA,
Mario Andretti.
USA.
Yes, USA. He wants to launch a new team called Andretti Global that is going to be based out of Indianapolis. And they're actually going to from what Mario said, by the way, I just have to say for like how it got announced, which was basically just Mario Andretti talking to like this like piss poor YouTube account guy called David Land who has like 3,000 subscribers, and Mario just dropped it that he was like, yeah, my son is trying to start an F1 team to him.
Beautiful.
And then that just got announced. That was beautiful, but
Should have been done via TikTok.
Oh god.
That's the proper way of doing this.
But yeah, it's I'm just gonna say I'm very happy to have another team coming in because I've been crying for a little while now about how there's just not enough cars on the grid, especially with sort of level of F1 talent that's out there. And the rumors, if they're to believe, they're going to be bringing in Colton Herta as their guy, which will be very interesting to see because he is very good at driving cars. So yeah, hopefully it'll go better than Haas.
Yeah, and not just Colton Herta. I think like isn't your son Reed is potentially involved if the timing is right?
yes, my child, Logan Sargent. I don't know if I've said it before on this podcast, but Logan Sargent is my child. He is my child F1 prodigy.
And you know what I think? I think like that's a pretty solid driver lineup, honestly. Logan Sargent and Colton Hayter, if that's what they end up coming in with. It could be a lot worse. I hope they do pretty well. Not too well. I don't like having Americans in my sport, but good luck.
What are we thinking about their potential engine choice? Because like I I think it's either going to be Ferrari or Renault. Probably Renault because uh, cheapest option. They don't have a customer team, and I think they definitely want a customer team. But I think that would be a weird match because Renault isn't a brand in the US, and like for what would be, the I was gonna say the better American team, but this year we actually might have a good American team. But
Yeah.
yeah, it would be weird to see a Renault badge on this car. Who knows?
I think, I mean, they might end up coming to an arrangement kind of like Red Bull have with Honda at the minute, whereas they are a customer. They get engines off another manufacturer, but they just like have the Andretti name and they do their own engine development throughout the season, sort of thing. I don't know really much about Andretti Motorsport and sort of if they'd really have the facilities to develop an F1 engine throughout a season, but I mean, if they're coming into the sport, they probably do.
They definitely don't to start out. At least I believe that they would have to choose Renault because Mercedes is already supplying 4 teams. They can't supply anymore. Ferrari have said that they have no wish to supply any other teams because they would run into supply issues themselves. Obviously, Honda is not doing anything right now. Red Bull don't quite have the technical capacity to supply, even though they are Honda. So
Although,
it would have to
it,
be Renault. And also Renault
it,
desperately needs money for something because they're just funding their F1 engine for themselves right now.
a wild card option, which was also announced sloppily, were Aston Martin's engine program, whenever that's going to be, that Lawrence Stroll just kind of said he's going to do on a whim. It looks like Aston Martin are going to be moving away from Mercedes engines.
Sponsored by Mohammed Bin Salman. This is
Oh yes,
the best thing ever. Just like make that engine run out of like pure petroleum, like the worst mazout you can find out there. Just like slap some ethanol in there to make it compliant with the rules, but otherwise just like a big cloud of smog coming out of that car would be amazing.
it's gonna be such a clusterfuck. I think yeah, it would be best for Andretti and Renault if they kind of go together. You know, what I mean, Alpine's and Renault, Alpine, whatever the fuck you want to call them now. Their engines have been fine. You know, since the sort of McLaren shit show a few years ago, they've not been slow. They've not been particularly quick, but I mean, Andretti's not going to be coming in and expecting to be the guy on top. So I think if you're not coming in with their Sargent and Herter targeting just like a decent mid-pack team for the first couple of seasons, you can't go wrong with a Renault engine.
Another thing that was said today actually was Stefano Domenicali's confirmed that there were other um, manufacturers, teams. We're not entirely certain what he meant by it, but he said there were other people interested in joining F1. That's most likely going to be something like a Porsche, BMW lineup, but
Yeah, I mean he's definitely talking about like the VW group. Like
Yeah, that's a given. That I think it's just a question of like agreeing on the next generation engine regulations. But I then we'll see. What I want out of that deal with a potential deal with Volkswagen is a works Lamborghini team based in Italy, but entirely staffed by Germans.
it'll be a Bugatti. Imagine a Bugatti team based in France, staffed by Italians and Germans. It'll be cursed. But I
And
don't think.
Croatians now.
Yeah, and Croatians because it's fucking Rimac, isn't it?
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Maybe I mean, having that kind of level of electric expertise in the team would good. Maybe if they came into F1, they would launch like a Rimac FE side project thing. Unlikely, but it would be kind of cool to see.
I would like to see, and I've said this in our last episode, I would like to see Cadillac and Chevrolet team up and put their knowledge together to form America's manufacturer.
How about a Renault engine but rebadged as a GM engine?
How about no?
I mean, like what is what's called the Le Car? Yeah, that
Oh
was
Jesus!
the AMC and Renault joint.
The
Maybe like French American collaboration back again.
If anything, you'd have Stellantis do that.
Yeah, I was just about to say, also Peugeot are very much getting back into the motorsports game, which is very nice to see. And I was sort of banded about that. Peugeot could come in with an engine at some point, which would be pretty cool. There is worse options, Again, if you're one of these, we'll get onto this later. But then one of these sort of Mercedes customer teams that are having trouble with their engine at the minute. You'll be looking around at other sort of companies that are looking to come into the sport with their engines and being like, please give me a decent power unit. So the door is definitely open for like I think what we have three engine manufacturers on the grid that do customer supplies and Red Bull, Honda. So ideally, you kind of want 6 or 7 engine manufacturers. So we do need a couple more, and it'll be good for just the sport in general to have a couple more engine manufacturers in, even if that is like VW coming in and just supplying themselves.
Yeah, that would definitely be optimal to have at least 5, preferably something like 6 engine manufacturers. If we get up to say 6 or I'm sorry, not 6, or up to like 12 or 13 teams, that would be wonderful. But I think that about covers it, unless anybody where he has
Just
something to say.
wondering about Honda's, like situation at the moment, because like originally their thing was like, okay, we're getting out of F1. They do this, they announce this on the year that they end up winning, not the constructor's title, but a driver's title, which is kind of like the one everybody cares about anyway. And still having some form of branding on the car. Both Red Bull and AlphaTauri has the HRC, which is one of Honda's like performance divisions logo. So yeah, I think they might be thinking about, all right, let's see what those new regulations are, and if we can justify it, we'll come back.
From what I understand, the when Honda announced their intention to withdraw from racing, that was under a president who was actually just recently ousted. So the new Honda command don't want to do that. They want to bring everything back in. But I think that's probably enough speculation on new teams or new engine manufacturers.
Yeah, I mean, I was going to add to the Honda thing. My prediction for the Honda thing is they'll be back for the new regulations. Probably is just supplying Red Bull again and maybe somebody else. I don't really see them staying gone for that long, especially considering that last year in the sport was a massive success. They won the World Drivers' Championship. So yeah, that's it.
All right, and that brings us on to the first test, which they didn't want to call a test for some reason, but in Barcelona, there wasn't really too much to say other than Ferrari and McLaren looked really good, and Mercedes and Red Bull
Womp
kind
womp.
of looked like they were in the bin.
I don't think they were in the bin. I just think that they were clearly not showing anything. Like not even sandbagging, just kind of just like, we're just gonna do some runs and see how the car feels. Because there's a lot of complaints about this test not being broadcasted, but it makes sense, right? You have brand new cars. Um, you don't really want to like show up with something that might be radically different. We'll talk about this later, and or like something that is completely unreliable. So, but yeah, so we only had times at the end of the day, and we saw that McLaren and Ferrari were fast. And to be fair, that's two of the most popular teams that aren't Mercedes or Red Bull. So that got a lot of people hyped.
Yeah, and sort of on the opposite end of the spectrum, Alpha barely got any testing in, and I think one of the Haas fucking exploded basically. So
The Haas did explode. They had somehow they had the least amount of laps out of all of the teams in the Barcelona test. So they really didn't look good.
So it looked at least like Haas were going to be shitboxes again, and our predictions for Alpha being a mess were going to come true. But we'll get to that in a minute.
Other things of note, there were a lot of, I won't say reliability issues, but there were a lot of concerns, I believe, at Aston, because they were having just a bunch of like small technical issues that they had to keep fixing. Other than that, it was really a quiet Barcelona test, wasn't it?
Yeah, and especially it came around this weird reveal season that was all about they're not showing the real car. This is like they just you know took the FIA model that we saw last year and just slapped the livery on it and said like, hey, look, it's the new car. So I think that the combination of this not being broadcasted live just meant that like we just kind of all like looked at this test and just went, we don't know, McLaren, Ferrari, good, I guess, and just thankfully it was only 2 weeks between the two, so we that was just a little bit of excitement coming out of Barcelona, but the real deal would probably be Bahrain.
Yes, and we started in Bahrain with bad omens for the Haas team. Oh, they had their cargo arrive late on a plane. Thank you, DHL. And they had to miss the first half of day one. And a lot of teams came out that eventually McLaren were the main ones behind this, blocked them from running an extra day. So they had to stretch out their sessions between the morning and the night. So it was not a good time for the Haas team.
I wonder if
But
something else happened in the news recently that could have impacted the Ural Kali Haas F1 team.
yeah, no, bitch boy Egghead got fired after Russia invaded Ukraine. Uh, I fully support Vladimir Putin and his invasion of Ukraine now because it removed Nikita Mazepin from Formula One.
This is such a genius sort of 50D chess move by Gunther Steiner. He saw what it would have been sort of a year and a half ago now that he signed Mazepin up. It came to him in a dream that Russia was going to invade Ukraine. So he went and he got the richest fucker he could possibly get. He took all their money for a season, did nothing that season, just fucked it off. And then with all the money he had, he developed the 2022 car to be as good as he could possibly have it. Russia invades Ukraine just like he knew was going to happen. He bins off the fucking egg boy and brings one of his lads back. Kevin Magnussen is back in the sport for at least another 2 years, probably.
He did
And
sign a multi-year contract, yes.
yeah,
Yeah, they haven't specified the exact length, but yeah, it led to an actually like pretty funny like mini silly season where like there were a couple of names that were brought up. The obvious one being I think it's Pietro Fittipaldi.
Yes, Pietro is all the Fittipaldis that are of racing age at this point are fail sons, but Pietro is the main one.
Yeah, yeah. We actually drove in the ass in Sakir in 2020. Um, that was a logical choice because reserve driver is in F2, active in F2, and knows the car. The other name that was going around for a bit, there was a little bit of speculation around Antonio Giovinazzi, but I think that was probably nothing. But there was a little glimpse of hope that uh, uh, the other nice German man that we've been missing for a few years is coming back. It's Nico Hulkenberg, the lawful Nico, I guess, compared to evil Nico Rosberg. But turns out that kind of out of nowhere, they re-signed K Mags, who was I I don't even know if it was planned to have like a full season lined up. We know he was going to race for Peugeot in WEC, but in traditional WEC fashion, the car was just not ready yet. So that didn't happen. And he was doing some stuff in America, but you know, nothing too serious.
Yeah, it's nice to have him back, especially considering the kind of shit show that the end of him and Grosjean's time at Haas was the last time. And unlike Roman, Kevin, like you say, hadn't really settled anywhere since, which was kind of unfortunate to see. And he is like, it feels like now he's been around for an incredibly long time, but he's still not 30, he's 29 or something. So it's nice to have him back at least for the foreseeable future.
It really is all coming up Gunter Steiner at this point, because you really he has the best of both worlds right now, in that he has the money from Uralkali and Mazepin, but he also has the driver that he probably should have had last year, guiding sort of not the 2021 car, obviously, because they abandoned that, but the development of the next year. And when K-Mag set the fastest lap of testing on day 2, I believe it was, at least fastest lap so far, everybody started raising their eyebrows at the Haas and thinking maybe this team is going to be a little bit better than everyone thought.
Yeah, there was a little bit of expectation that they would be better, for sure, but not by that much. And also, like you mentioned, like bringing up the car, but it's not just the car that is really like benefiting from K Mag's return. It's also Mick Schumacher. You know, like he had an okay rookie season considering, but also like you can't really do a comparison to such a terrible teammate in Mr. Mazepin. But now he has like a mentor kind of teammate, someone who is experienced and still competitive, to kind of like bring him up, because I think Mick is talented, but is the kind of driver that like needs to settle really like for a couple of seasons to really get to his potential. And so I think like this move is probably the best thing for Mick's career right now.
Yeah, I think it really is great for Mick, because now not only does Mick have sort of Seb, who he can sort of pal about the paddock with, and he's kind of settling in with all the other drivers and stuff, and apparently, by all accounts, very nice kid, gets along with everybody, unlike his teammate last season. And now having K-Mag there with him actually in the team to sort of help develop his actual driving, I think we'll probably see that pay dividends before too long. We'll get to the sort of results of the race and stuff in a bit, but I think having an experienced driver like Magnussen will help make it a hell of a lot.
So one of the things too with Bahrain that I won't say it's completely intertwined with that, especially with like Haas's bad omens at the start, but we had a lot of teams just having horrible luck and horrible testing results. Alpine's side pods literally disintegrated day 2, I believe it was.
That was FP1 or FP2, right?
No, it was testing.
It was testing. It was the second. I think it was the second or
Oh
third day of
yeah,
testing.
second day of testing. Yeah,
And
yeah.
Ocon's, I think it was right side pod, just decided it didn't want to be attached to the car anymore. So they stuck the old side pod from last season on his Alpine, which was an interesting move, and that didn't seem to affect the car all that much.
It wasn't from last season. It was just an earlier design. That was the first time they had run that updated design, and it didn't end up going too well. One of the other things.
Speaking of, sorry to interrupt, but speaking of side pods, the big story of the Bahrain test was a lot of teams showed up with radical new designs. Well, not really radical new designs, but like change their side pods because they believe that it's the one area with the new aero regs that you can really like tweak things a lot. And so we've had everybody like stunned at Mercedes showing up with a car with barely any side pods for some reason, which made a lot of people like really excited about the potential of the car. But we'll talk about that in a bit.
Yeah, and sort of speaking of Mercedes's zero side pod thing, Ferrari's side pods are beautiful, and if you're listening to this and somehow haven't seen it, go watch Ted Kravitz explaining how the side pod's design works with a fucking baby bell, and then harassing Carlos Sainz with the baby bell. It's one of the most incredible pieces of not television you'll ever see.
This man just pulls a baby bell out of his pocket, and he was like, "Yeah, I use this to explain it to all the fans, and I'm gonna eat it later."
It's not even good cheese. It's
Just
garbage cheese.
the,
Come
the
on.
fact he puts the cheese in his pocket without protection in the fucking desert. This man must be walking around stinking of cheese for like until he changes his pants. Madman.
Is this a Babybel or?
It is a baby bell, yes. Well, it's the outer casing of a baby bell. The actual baby bell's gathering dust in my pocket.
No, you ate it.
No, I did not. No. No, I will eat it later because it's about it's Spanish for lunch. Cena, no. Pranzo, that's Italian. Mittagessen, that's German.
Comer.
Comer, it's about lunchtime, but no.
Yeah, and then we also had, of course, all the porpoising, which I'm not gonna get into it because everyone's fucking explained it, and I'm tired of hearing it. You know what it is already if you listen to this podcast.
Car goes boing, 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 boing.
And
Yeah.
we also had Lando Norris doing all 3 days of testing because Daniel Ricciardo was feeling unwell, and what do you know? It turns out to be coronavirus.
Yeah, Danny was out all of testing, which meant essentially the first time he got to drive the car in two and a half weeks was to qualify, which went interestingly.
Well, no, he did FP.
Was he back for FP3? I thought
He did all the FP.
did he?
Yes.
Oh man, must have not been paying attention to that. I was crying
No,
about the times.
You just missed you just missed the second test, the entirety of the Bahrain test.
Oh, yeah, and Seb missed the FPs because he also got the nasty coffees.
Spoilers.
Yeah, spoilers. Yes. Other than that, with testing, you had Ted and his funny baby bell moments. I'm trying to think of sort of what
Mercedes with their side pods.
Side pods.
They looked really good until they didn't look really good in lap times.
Yeah.
But as usual, everybody just went, they're not showing, they're sandbagging. And I kind of believed that in a way, that, they're Mercedes, they're like, even with budget caps and restrictions on development, they would be the team to just like nail a new design with no issue. So coming out of the test, I was like, yeah, it was a little worrying seeing the amount of purposing, but I would believe that like, okay, it's because like they just got to the track, they're just like figuring it out, and by race week, everything would be fine.
Yeah, and it's not an unreasonable assumption considering the past 8 years of Mercedes just turning up and obliterating everybody, even when it seems like they might not. It's kind of conditioned us to believe that, even till that last moment, just being like, oh, they'll pull half a second out of their asses somewhere, But yeah, it's a very. I actually think when they first announced the car, I was upset that they hadn't stuck with the all black livery. But then when you see that car without the side pods and the way it's designed, it does actually look pretty incredible.
It looks weird without the side pods. It's strange. It's really like, because you do have a little bit of a pod shape. You do have like a little bit of that protrusion of the sides, but it's I don't really like it personally. I'd rather like the city side pods, like the square Aston Martin has, which is like, I don't know, I just think it's very funny. But yeah, it's still, you you should think like, all right, they're coming out of a season where apparently something happened in the end. I don't know, I don't remember. And they're coming up with a new driver in George Russell, who really probably wants to show what he's capable of once outside of a shit box. Uh, but yeah, the rolling into first practice, like it seemed that we've had Red Bull doing fine. Not a lot of long runs, which not too foreshadowing, not to do foreshadowing, but put a point, put a pin in that. Sorry. Um, and you've had Ferrari still looking absolutely like strong, fast, and reliable.
Hey, everybody for some reason had Red Bull on top of Ferrari going into the weekend, which I questioned considering that Ferrari had a stellar testing. It was odd to see everybody say Red Bull was on top.
It's recency bias. It's just you think that like Ferrari are still the absolute clown shoes teams they were for the last couple of years.
So we had free practice, and the only thing that we have on the notes is that one good Merc lap, which I don't understand.
Yeah, so at the end of FP2, I think it was George Russell set a time that was, I think, only like less than half a second from Max Verstappen's fastest time. That I guess, just I think it's a form of cope somehow that like Mercedes looked in trouble all weekend, and you thought that like you don't want a season of just like Red Bull dominating everything, right? You don't want just one car at the front, not even two cars, because we know that Checo sadly isn't that good. Um, but yeah, it was interesting. I think to see the reaction to that, but I think it was mostly like some form of like hyping uh, uh, everyone to the fact that like it's not going to be as one sided as people thought.
Yeah, that was the kind of the brief moment of, oh no, they're doing it again. Oh shit, oh fuck, we're fucked. But for that George lap. But and yeah, like I say, Haas ended up. That was kind of we started to think, oh, maybe they're not. Maybe they actually might be all right this season with their sort of Ferrari power units and not having a literal fucking egg in one of their cars. So and that was that. I think that was pretty much all free practice was. McLaren trying to get in some Danny Rick development laps because he had missed the week previous of testing. And I don't remember anything else particularly interesting from practice other than that.
Nothing too much, but we had Mercedes actually down. They were not fastest. You had Haas right up there, which everybody was liking. Um, Everybody thought, McLaren, Alpine, maybe even like Aston Martin or Williams, they were sandbagging a bit maybe because they were down below in the lower rankings. And it turned out it didn't really work because we had Quali and it was not good, folks. It was not good.
It was interesting, to say the least, in terms of uh, expectations that were like there were tons of memes on Twitter, on Formula Dank or whatever, or like, all right, this is time. Mercedes is gonna show up. Like George Russell is Mr. Saturday once again, and yeah, none of that happened.
It became pretty much immediately clear that anything with a McLaren power, not McLaren, Mercedes, fucking Freudian slip, still just the torment of what happened is ruined my brain. Is the anything with a Mercedes power unit was clearly gonna be not as quick as anything without it. The back sort of like immediately the first five knocked out, included Danny Rick, Stroll went out, Albon. it was worrying. Immediately, Alpha and Bottas started setting pretty quick lap times, which everybody was shocked about because I'd been tipping them to be total shit this season. So seeing that was a unpleasant surprise.
I think the other big surprise with Alpha is that their rookie drivers, Guan Yu Zhou, actually managed to go into Q2 for fast qualifying. That was maybe not that much of a surprise because he's been relatively consistent in F2 and is quite experienced compared to guys like Tsunoda, for example, who were like really fast tracked into F1. Uh, but yeah, it ended up with this very funny situation of Valtteri Bottas ending up right in the middle of two Mercedes, behind Lewis Hamilton, but ahead of George Russell.
Yeah, you had the in Q1 you had probably the biggest surprise being Yuki Tsunoda and Daniel Ricciardo, of course, getting knocked out. Tsunoda kind of scruffed, but yeah, he did that. Zhou just made his way out of Q1. He was dead last in Q2. After that, of course, you had Albon. Norris was the other big surprise of Q2. Then you had Schumacher and Ocon.
Yeah, Schumacher getting out of both Haas's getting out of Q2, which Q3, which we kind of predicted out following practice because they were looking pretty quick, but K-Mag in particular by this point was setting pretty serious lap times, and everybody was pretty hyped. K-Mag's back and he's doing bits in what seems to be a pretty quick car. Yeah, and Tsunoda, he went out in but he was the quickest in Q3, and Zhou went out, the first guy, last in Q2, which gave us what we were predicting last season, the Sino-Japanese war to begin with. So we thought was going to be in the race. It didn't really work out that way, but it was nice to see those two lads together on the grid. A guy who everybody kind of predicted in Zhou to have been, looked down upon. We all kind of thought. I mean, I thought he was kind of going to be pretty shit this season. But he still might be. But he did pretty well in Bahrain, the qualifying especially. How much of that was the car just being quicker than we all thought? We don't know. And Sonoda, a guy who I predicted was going to be much better this season, kind of fluffing his lines a bit there, but he did a little bit better in the race, which we'll talk about in a bit.
To be fair to Sonoda, he also scored points in his debut, so it'll be interesting to see how Zhou does over the year. Looks like he has a better car, but we'll see.
And also, speaking of Tsunoda, still like you have to be reminded that a few hours before qualifying during FP3, he did not do any running due to I think it was a steering issue.
It was a power steering fluid issue.
Yeah. So he still did okay considering, I guess.
A Red Bull car with steering issues. That's what we call foreshadowing.
Yeah, foreshadowing. So then we had Q3, which was, I would say, is actually probably one of the most interesting Q3s we've had of recent events. At the very bottom was Pierre Gasly. That AlphaTauri over one lap at least doesn't look particularly quick in comparison. George Russell actually was just missed out, like through P6 to P9. I think the gap was only about half a second, so that's interesting. You had Russell, then Fernando Alonso, Kevin Magnussen. I think he actually would have been faster, but he had a radiator issue. Some coolant was leaking, so what they had to do basically was just fill it up and pray to God that he lasted over one lap. Then you had Bottas P6 in the Alfa Romeo, Lewis Hamilton P5, Mercedes get in the bin, Sergio Perez, then Carlos Sainz and Max Verstappen, who were only separated by 6/1000th, and your pole sitter Charles Leclerc.
Another thing to note, Russell, I think was what you said, was ninth, and he kind of overcooked it a bit. I think in one of the turns, and Mr. Saturday's kind of streak of being incredible in qualifying, particularly over sort of the back half of last season, came to a kind of crushing end, which not a lot of people saw coming in his first race in the Mercedes. Kind of pretty disappointing from George there, but. Like you say, Lewis qualifying in fifth was just so bizarre to see. Like, you know, he not having that moment of, oh, here comes Lewis pulling like just some absurd lap time out of his arse was quite nice, to be honest, because it made qualifying unpredictable and fun.
And also things light up really well in Q3 because we've had Carlos being faster, then Leclerc just edging P1. I don't think it was. I think it was quite close, and then Verstappen being the last driver, the last like potential pole man, just failing by a bit at the end. So that was very exciting.
Yeah, it was actually very evenly matched, I would say, between the top three of Leclerc, Verstappen, and Sainz, at least over one lap. Perez was kind of in the mix, but he was a little too far back to do anything. What I was pleasantly surprised about, I think everybody was that Bottas put it up there so high, and he really, I mean, I'll admit, I thought Alfa Romeo were going to be dead last this season. It's not a team that's really known for its competence, at least in race. So to see the development side, at least come through, is nice to see.
I
Yeah,
think it's
their car looks pretty serious this year, much more than at least me and you thought was going to be, Reed.
and it's like a combination as well of the new drivers because you have Bottas who is very experienced, not the fastest guy, of course, but still quite decent, and Zhao, which is like very motivated, compared to Kimi, who's kind of just like on and off, and Giovinazzi, who's like not very good at qualifying and not very good at the rest as well. So that's things are looking up over at Alfa Romeo.
On top of that, you had I think what we were saying about the how close it was the top three. I've got it up. Yeah, there was just over a tenth and a half in the top four between both the Red Bulls and the Ferraris, which means the sort of top of that that qualifying. You know, those top two teams, those cars are pretty close in qualifying spec, at least for the time being, which was very interesting to see. And also, we'll get onto it once we talk about the race. But weird saying the over one lap that the pace is that close, but the overall race pace was there was a pretty big gap between the two.
Yeah, you could certainly call it that. Unless you want to say anything about Gasly or Ocon, I think we can move on to the race.
I just think that Gasly just fucked his laps in Q3, and Ocon like did his best, but probably wasn't really up there.
Yeah, so I mean, you get into the race, and of course, the start. I just have to say, start of the race, that was the mother of all water bottle starts. It was.
Bottas doing what Bottas does best and fluffing what to that point had been an incredible weekend for him in the Alpha by just having the worst start imaginable. I can't remember how many cars it was he dropped back, but in about 5 corners he had dropped 3 or 4 places to cars which to that point had been much worse than his.
Halfway through the lap, he had already dropped to like 12th, so yeah, like 5 or 6.
That's wild.
Madness.
And he went all the way down to, I believe, 17th at one point. So that was very interesting. Of course, we had at, I believe it was turn 5, the Ocon Schumacher disco with some Tokyo Drift action.
Yeah,
Yeah.
Ocon gave Mick a nudge, and Mick recovered really well. To be fair, that was it. It was the shot from inside Mick's cockpit of him catching it and getting it back going was quite nice. But yeah, go on, Murray.
It's nice at least to see Ocon just like straight up coming out after the race and say like, all right, my bad, I fucked it up. The one thing that surprised me was the fact that like he got a 5 seconds penalty for that, which I agree. To be fair, he did cause a collision, but it shows that like the new rule, the new race directors were like not going to consider everything that happened in the first few laps to be a racing incident, which was kind of the trend before. So that was a little bit of interesting stuff out of this.
Yeah, I have to say too, on top of the stewarding, the kids all behaved this weekend, which was kind of surprising to see. After all the series of warnings, reprimands, and uh, fines that were issued over the course of last season, which is, it's a nice change. There's a big difference, at least in what's been put on. The only big stewarding issue I have from this weekend, and it's not even that big, is that I believe it was Sergio Perez went like completely over the white lines, which the steward said was the boundary for the racing track this weekend, and it would be for every track going forward. And he didn't get his time deleted, so that's just something minor. But that's the only thing I can think of.
Yeah, more white line comedy, which I think we'd all kind of predicted was going to happen this season. Yeah, the stewards. It was very refreshing to have a race which was stewarded fairly competently. And I mean, again, like you're saying, to be fair, the drivers didn't really give them all that much to steward. Like the racing was pretty clean. Not There was no real fuck ups that I can think of off the top of my head. Yeah, they say Checo kind of really probably should have had his lap time deleted. I don't think it would have actually affected the results to
Yeah,
qualifying anyway.
you only had like Vettel, not Vettel, Stroll, sorry, and I think it was who's Stroll almost running into? I forgot, but yeah, you had Stroll doing a little oopsie in the middle, but other than this, like it was super clean, which was a big surprise, especially considering like purposing making those cars a little iffy on corners and corner entry. But it also shows that like the new regulations mean that like you can actually follow. So if you can follow, you don't have to dive bomb, you don't have to do like dick moves, and it means you can have clean racing.
Getting on after the start, of course, you had sort of just the top teams filtering through. K-Mag was up there. He was beating off Checo and the Mercs for a couple laps, but he kind of just fell back as, they had the better car. But getting into the pit stops, you had Leclerc just match Verstappen, and then yeah, it was very clean between those two when they started fighting.
Yeah, and that's what I was going to say. Speaking of sort of dive bombing, Charles and Max had a very fun fight for a couple of laps there because Max had gotten the undercut, which was a ridiculously powerful on Charles. It took 3 seconds or something out of his lead, and they really went at it for a couple of laps. And I think, look, I was skeptical about what they were saying about the new regulations will allow much closer racing and stuff, and man, it looks like it worked. It was some of the best sort of continuous multiple lap racing we've seen in a very long time.
It was surprising to see exactly how Leclerc kind of baited Verstappen into going for the overtake at turn one. He wasn't even using eighth gear, for Christ's sake, and it seemed very immature from Verstappen to be going for that so early, and he did just wreck his tires because of it. And something else that I need to comment on is that the tires went away extremely quickly. It's not as if they dropped off or anything, but they did just after about only 14 laps or so, were about 3 seconds slower than from when they were fresh.
Yeah, Mercedes is started on the softs, and those cars went through those soft tires like nothing. I mean, I think Hamilton pitted after 7 laps or something crazy.
I think it was
Um,
12.
Oh, yeah, he pitted. The Hamilton went in first, and there was some speculation about Mercedes kind of eating those tires more than everybody else. George stayed out pretty long, so and there was Hamilton was complaining after or during the race about stopping too early, but Hamilton does complain about everything, even if it's kind of worthy of complaining or not. So take that with a pinch of salt. Um, yeah, the tires and Hamilton. Again, sort of go back to the Mercedes. Hamilton came out on hards and had a really hard time warming him up over that sort of first lap. And what we saw from then is the teams that were fighting it out would generally try and kind of stay away from the hard compound because they seem to be a bit of a handful at first.
It's also interesting to see that like there's a big difference in tire wear from teams to teams because we saw Ferrari doing pretty fine on. They didn't do extremely long stints. They did like what was expected, but like even when they came up to the pits, it was like you could see them like still going for a few extra laps. So that was I think a good piece of how confident Ferrari were in their car.
Yeah, the other thing about Ferrari too is that they were actually competent in their strategy in pitting for once. They did what they had to do. They just copied Verstappen with Leclerc word for word. They used Carlos Sainz as the option, and it worked out in the end. I mean, you could argue that Sainz would have overtaken Perez later on at some point, but Leclerc won that race on merit. Sainz had a podium on merit. He was where he started. So I mean, I have to congratulate them. They finally have gotten rid of the clown shoes, at least for now.
Yeah, Binotto has taken his clown makeup off. Leclerc has stopped shitting in his racing suit, and it is going very well for Ferrari. They were incredibly fast. Like you were saying about the sort of Max Leclerc fight, Leclerc didn't seem to really have to try all that much. You know, he was clever about the way he defended. He baited Max into just really overdriving that car, which caused problems later on. And you're looking at that. I was just looking at the fastest lap things here. Leclerc was set the fastest lap, I think, towards the end of the race, last few laps, and the highest speed achieved in the race by a couple of kilometers an hour was Leclerc. So that Ferrari is serious. It goes.
I think that Charles drove the perfect race. Like perfect start, did not do any mistake. I don't think we've seen lockups from him. Even his timing coming down the pit lane was like on point. So that was amazing. That was like one of the best drives we've seen. It was not something that jumped when you watched the race because like he was in the lead for most of it. But I think it was like a perfect drive.
It was clear who looked like the world champion that race, and it wasn't the world champion, unfortunately.
Yeah, Max kind of lost his head. Not in a way we're kind of used to seeing Max lose his head. He didn't kind of go and try and strangle Esteban Ocon or anything, but he got baited very easily by Leclerc into thinking that there was something there that to pretty much most everybody thought after the first sort of lap or two after the undercut very clearly wasn't. And he toasted his tires pretty badly over those sort of 3 or 4 laps. Dive bombing like really kind of shouldn't have. Leclerc again. A lot of this was down to Leclerc doing some incredible defensive driving, being very well sort of a lot of feinting and stuff going into corners and easing off on the throttle on the straight to kind of give Max a little bit of false hope. And also, this reminds me probably is a good point to talk about. DRS seems to be very powerful this season, more so than it has been for a little while. Some of the DRS overtakes we saw this weekend were pretty insane. Again, Leclerc used Max's DRS advantage very well to bait him into making lunges and things, especially down into turn 1, that Max really had no hope of doing.
You have to remember there that Leclerc wasn't using eighth gear for those lunges, so you have to take that into account. But DRS does seem like it is more useful this season.
I think it's none. I think the DRS thing was probably just like you said, Max going as fast as possible. Whereas meanwhile Leclerc knew that like since this is more or less a double DRS track, because the second DRS zone is very close from the pit straight. I think Charles was just way more intelligent in his racecraft. Just like, all right, you're gonna pass me here, fine. I'm just gonna stick with you for a couple turns and then just pass you back as soon as I get DRS. And that's like perfect race IQ, especially because he knows that Verstappen, while he has matured over the last few years, is still gonna be like very testy if you really fight him. And he just like played mind games and it worked perfectly.
Yeah, and this is going to be incredibly fun to watch over the course of the season. If Leclerc keeps getting the upper hand on Verstappen as he did at Bahrain, also it doesn't hurt Charles that Ferrari is pretty clearly quicker than the Red Bull, as kind of bears out with the second drivers. I mean, again, you can make the argument that Sainz is just quicker than Checo to begin with, but Charles used that to his advantage very well. He, like you say, he let Verstappen pass when he needed to because he knew that the Ferrari had the oomph in it to just go, all right, next straight, I'm having you.
Yeah, it helps too for Ferrari that they are probably by far the best on tires. Uh, they can go fast around the track, and they can keep going fast, unlike all the other teams, where they can only do, probably about 2 to 3 laps at maximum speed. Ferrari can do that for probably about 5 or 6. It's a stark contrast that Ferrari is good on tire wear now and good on low speed corners instead of just trying to brute force their way into winning around a racetrack.
Yeah, because especially the one of the surprise for me was hearing Max on the radio complaining about his tire a lot, which is not something we're used to. Usually, you would be like, they're fine, and I think there's a problem with the Red Bull there.
Yeah, Max learned from the best last season when it comes to complaining about tire wear. Sort of all that experience racing Lewis for a season, Max has been like, if I complain about tire wear, maybe the tires won't actually go. I mean, it seemed to work for him, but yeah, the Ferrari being good on tires is weird. And again, through the low speed corners, I think it's very funny. I was saying the other day that Ferrari, are probably going to dominate the street circuits because that car does look like it'll be very good around short and like sort of slow and twisty circuits. But also their main driver is Charles Leclerc, so he will be, it'll be interesting to see if he can actually do anything at a street circuit this season. And hopefully, if he does crash, they remember to inspect the full car. I think, and we have a not to get too ahead of ourselves, but we have a street circuit coming up next in Jeddah, which will be probably fucking insane with these cars and their cornering speeds. So I'm looking forward to seeing that, and yeah, I think that'll be fun.
Yeah, and then of course we had just pretty much all of the Mercedes teams just at the far back of the field, like by and large. I mean, you'll see it in the end result. The final 6 drivers that actually finished the race were all Mercedes powered. So I don't know what it is, but it's not good.
There was a few speculations like from the usual like sources, the race and whatever, that actually it maybe is not that bad. That like all teams have like their own individual issues. Like McLaren definitely has much more going bad for them than just the engine. Williams, well, they're Williams, and Aston Martin probably went for like a very specific design that is not gelling with pace. But yeah, there's a bit of worry to be had from the Mercedes power department.
I think a lot of it might be aero. You have a lot of teams, or like a lot of like Williams and Aston, going in very stark, different contrasts. Aston also has an overheating issue, as they were telling Nico Hulkenberg to lay off full rev to sort of cool the engine on the very final lap. Uh, McLaren, they weren't porpoising. We might have just learned that that's because they don't have any downforce, so they don't have the power to porpoise, or they're running too high a rake, or something like that. We don't know everything, and of course, it might be the Mercedes power engine itself too. Might be part of it. It very well could be the third fastest power unit now, instead of very fastest or very close to it.
Yeah, and it's also going to be interesting to see how that Mercedes engine is going to fare in slower tracks because Bahrain pretty fast in terms of speeds and has like lengthy straights. So once we get to street tracks or something like Hungary, maybe Mercedes could have like a more efficient engine there. So who knows? It's still too early to call. So the other thing that was also kind of interesting was it's quite funny to see Esteban Ocon in a pink BWT car fighting a Spanish speaking teammate while having Othmar Safenauer as a team principal. I think the boy had some flashbacks of the worst years he's had in F1 when he was his Force India. But Alpine, who was kind of like one of those teams that nobody really knew what they were capable of, seemed to be doing okay. Kind of like very similar performance from last year, and this still seems to be gelling well together. So, yeah, that's a decent showing from Alpine.
Yeah, and Ocon he finished quite well. I mean, he had the penalty and all that, but I think his track placement by the end was maybe seventh, which was much higher than it looked like they would have been doing in qualifying, which obviously big asterisk considering the DNFs in front of him, but it was still a respectable, decent points finish for Alpine that they can be fairly happy about, given the sort of overall performance of the car on the weekend.
It was very good to see a double points finish for Alpine, even if it was in the lower placings. Fernando Alonso, he had a kind of quiet race where he kind of was just overshadowed by everyone around him, even though he did perfectly fine. Fell back a couple spots from his qualifying position, but he did perfectly fine.
But sadly for me as a Frenchie, we've had my sweet, wonderful himbo, Pierre Gasly, having his car suddenly turn on fire right next to the spot where Grosjean crashed in 2020, which was it's kind of like a weird moment, saying like, "Ooh, you don't want to see that."
Burned Frenchman corner.
Yeah,
There were definitely some bad vibes from it. I immediately noticed that when we were all watching together. It was interesting to see because I don't think that issue was related to anything else. I
I
believe they
think
said it was an MGUK issue at the very end.
yeah, MGK, because you can clearly see like from the onboard that uh,
Power
it's not.
just cuts.
You're right. It's not just the internal combustion engine. It's the entire electrical system.
Yeah, so that was interesting to see. And of course, that because he just stopped right by the side of the track, that brought out the safety car. And of course, everybody pitted after that, getting some fresh tires. Verstappen had pitted just beforehand to try and get some sort of advantage on Leclerc because he obviously wasn't winning in the current pace. And then that basically gave Leclerc a free pit stop along with everyone else. So I believe safety car went around for something like 8 laps or so, and then we had a 7-lap sprint at the very end.
It was funny because right when Gasly's car caught on fire, I joked that Helmut Marko somewhere in his office pressed a big red button saying sacrifice Gasly. But because originally it was just like a VSC, so I felt like, all right, enough to help Max get back to Charles and then like race him hardcore till the end. But no, because those batteries you don't fuck around with them, so it ended up being like a quite lengthy safety car.
Yeah, just seeing the guy stand around the car poking it with the sensors and stuff like, is it gonna fucking explode? Was quite funny. But it was the safety car did last, like you're saying, 8 laps, and this meant, yeah, it set up a sort of bit of a tasty finish with again, sort of the running was Ferrari, Red Bull, and then things happened, which
Max had some issues, let's call them. First, he reported a steering issue with
That was during the safety car, I think, or
yeah
right
that
before the safety car.
that was basically during the safety car when we heard it. just like rough steering all around, kind of uneven too. Apparently that was from a bent track rod that happened when they dropped the car on the final pit stop. And let's be honest, folks, is it really an Adrian Newey car if it's not fragile as fuck?
Yeah. Also, Max got completely ghosted on the restart. There's a beautiful restart from Charles, like just slowing all the way down, Max creeping back up, and then as soon as like they showed up on the straight, like Charles just went away.
And then he had the issue, I believe it was 2 or 3 laps to go. Started reporting that he was having battery issues. You could see by the light on the back of the car that the battery was stuck in recharge mode, and then of course it just went downhill from there.
Yeah. So it was how many laps? It was essentially 3 laps left to go. It started getting real bad, and he went in. They pulled him into the pit. He was very angry, understandably, to be fair. And then this meant it was a Ferrari 1-2 pretty much guaranteed for the rest of the race, bar sort of Ferrari shenanigans. And then that left Checo to defend against Lewis, who had caught him up after the safety car.
You have to remember too that Verstappen's car died before he hit the pits. It died on the front straight.
He was wheeling around a crippled car for most of a lap, pretty much.
I loved the radio of his engineer just being like completely stoic. Meanwhile, Max was like screaming, and like you can see him, like you can hear the tears through the radio. That was quite an amazing moment.
Yeah, and then once Max had gone in, the running was Leclerc, Sainz, and Checo, followed pretty closely behind by Lewis. And this ended up being more interesting than we thought it was going to be as well. What ended up happening was, I think it was the first turn 1 of the very last lap. Lewis had been putting Checo under a decent amount of pressure, but nothing too, Lewis might have got him in the end, but maybe not. It's kind of we'll never know, because what happened was, I think fucking Checo's engine cut out, and it fucked him as they went around the corner. Checo's engine cut out, the car spun, Hamilton went around, and that was it for Red Bull. Three of the 4 Red Bull engined cars didn't finish.
Yeah, Checo's car was stuck on the apex as his engine cut out mid-turn, so the lack of power just spun him around. It was
amazing, because there was this radio call, I think like a lap before, when like Checo just said losing power right just after Max retired in the pits.
It was on the straight just before he cut out.
Yeah, so like a lot of drama in the last couple of laps that just somehow gave a podium to Lewis Hamilton and Mercedes, who were expected to just like barely be outside the podium. Going
to interject a little bit of a personal story, like both of you were around for. Is with about 10 laps to go, I decided I was going to go to the shop, because what interesting will happen in the last 10 laps? It shuts in 20 minutes. I need to get there and back. I'm not gonna miss anything. And I go to the shop. I come back about 10 minutes later. The race has just finished. To abject chaos. Red Bulls didn't finish. Hamilton's on podium. What the fuck?
Yeah, so that brings us to our finishing order, which was, of course, Gasly, not counted. Then Verstappen and Perez did not finish, but they completed enough of the race to be counted. Hulkenberg, Latifi, Norris, Ricciardo, Albon, and Stroll, as I said, the 6 Mercedes customer drivers. Then you had Mick Schumacher in 11. Then Guan Yu Zhou getting his first points on debut. Alonso 9th, Tsunoda 8th, which was actually quite a nice recovery drive after that pretty abysmal qualifying. Esteban Ocon 7th, Valtteri Bottas 6th, Kevin Magnussen 5th, which was very pleasant to see. Then you had George Russell, Lewis Hamilton, and then, of course, Carlos Sainz and Charles Leclerc.
It was quite amazing to hear the radio from Kevin Magnussen, like post race. That's such a wholesome story to see, like this guy showing up out of nowhere, like a week away from the race, and managed to like do quite well in qualifying. And he had a kind of on and off race He did like a few mistakes, a few lockups that cost him some positions. I think one of the pit stops was quite slow as well. But yeah, to do your comeback and finishing fifth is quite amazing.
Yeah, it looked like they never actually quite fully got that hydraulic problem sorted, which meant the car looked a bit heavy in the steering. He ran wide a couple of times, that a couple of mistakes that he probably wouldn't have made otherwise. But yeah, he drove a brilliant race, and I mean, just to even be in, if the Red Bulls hadn't sort of had their sort of collective disasters, finishing seventh would have been more than a respectable finish for him in his first drive back in, and a great finish for Haas. You know, Steiners are very happy.
Yeah, that was very good to see Steiner and everyone. And then of course, if you're a Mercedes fan, I'm not. It was nice to see them. And it was good to see Ferrari back, though. I think everybody could appreciate after their long run of just being completely out of it that they're finally back on top now, and in big fashion too.
And this is a Ferrari team that is now very likable. Like it's far away from the dominant era, or kind of like them just signing previous world champions at other teams and trying to just like get championships out of pure money and influence because everybody wants
No,
to win.
I'm gonna still hold a grudge against Ferrari. I can't not do it, but like I say, I've always said, when it comes down to Red Bull or Ferrari, I'll choose Ferrari. Even, you know, it's a bit of a catch-22, but here we are, and it is nice seeing them do well again. To be fair,
But they're not playing football. It's fine. We can tolerate those Italians.
They're not even fighting not Mercedes, McLaren now.
But yeah, no, it's. I mean, Ferrari looks like a super team right now, and it feels nice. It feels like a good story to have right now.
even if it's the two teams I like least, this does look like it should be Touchwood a spicy battle for the top. You know.
Yeah, and on the opposite spectrum of that, Red Bull have a lot of questions to answer after that pretty miserable end to the race. It's come out now, apparently, that at least some teams suspect that Red Bull just underfueled the car way too much and that they ran out of gas.
Fucking NASCAR moment over at Red Bull.
I would tend to believe that because it doesn't seem like that was a fuel pump error when nobody else was having that issue, since that is just a regulation part that everybody has the same copy of.
And I don't think they underfueled on purpose because a lot of people pointed out that they were the only team who didn't do full race runs with like a decent fuel load, and I think they just couldn't calculate their fuel load right, and yeah, that bite them in the ass. And I think like that's like the overconfidence that was showing up this year, starting to just like be a mistake.
Yeah, so probably a good time to talk about the pecking order here. You have, I'd say, probably just going bottom to top. You have probably, I'd say, Aston Martin are fairly comfortably the slowest team, um, followed by Williams, then McLaren. After that, probably I would have to say is AlphaTauri, then Alpine, uh, then Haas. Then you have, of course, Mercedes, Red Bull, and Ferrari.
I think that I would still put Mercedes below Haas, at least for Jeddah, if we're just talking about the next race. But then that
Oh no,
picking
I'm talking
order.
about over the full season, at least, or at least how it looks now to be over the full season.
Okay, so I would believe in a Mercedes and McLaren recovery. Um, McLaren to recover faster. Mercedes, sorry, to recover faster than McLaren. Because McLaren seems to have like a lot of issues with the car. Whereas like Mercedes, if they figure out purposing, would at least be like decent enough, even with a slower engine.
Yeah, that seems like I think I agree with you both on that pretty much. I think the only thing I would say is I think Mercedes will I wouldn't give them too long before they're right up with Ferrari and Red Bull. To be honest, I don't think they'll be. I don't think they'll be fighting for the title necessarily, but they'll be good enough to the point where their finishes will affect whatever title fight does conspire between Leclerc and Verstappen. I think we'll see a couple of Mercedes race wins definitely, but on merit by the end of the season. And McLaren, I think they'll maybe sort their shit out. It kind of depends. Like, it depends what the problems is. I think they've really just gotten fucked by circumstance and their own, like, which has just compounded their own problems, which they had to begin with. Their problems, like the brake issue, seems to have been, like, fairly solvable. There's not a whole lot you can do when the engine you've been supplied is not very good, like it seems to be with all the Mercedes customer teams finishing taking up all the bottom spots essentially. And also Danny Rick having not had a lot of testing. I think overall in the last week of testing they actually ran the fewest laps. I think they ran about 200 laps, and then the nearest was Haas, which ran 230 something. But if you look
They
at the
did.
top teams, yeah, the top teams were running in excess of 300 laps. So yeah,
I think the issue with McLaren is that they probably played it too safe, because at the end of the race, both Norris and Ricardo said like the car was feeling fine. It was just slow, and I think like McLaren was the first team to seem to have solved the purposing issue. So yeah, I think they looked at the regulations and probably went a bit too conservative. So maybe if they can like upgrade a few packages here and there to be more aggressive, we could see them like go up a few places.
well, that was an interesting thing as well. Mercedes admitted they got their setup wrong. They said, I think it was George that came out and said they were just running. One of the reasons they were slower during the race was they were running too much downforce, which also might have been. This is also probably a problem McLaren were having, because they didn't like having, they didn't really have as much time to get their setups kind of adjusted. Obviously, it doesn't explain for the entire lack of pace, but I think you take this sort of amalgamation of shit shows, like mini shit shows that have gone on at McLaren over the past sort of few weeks in development of the new car, that it's built up. And like we were saying before, they were pretty good and they were good at Barcelona testing, and I think this drop off between what we saw at Barcelona and what we saw this weekend is bigger than what would just be explained by a pretty shitty car. And like we was saying, both of the drivers have said this car is actually quite a nice car to drive. It's just really fucking slow.
Yeah, one of the other things too that's probably worth of note in terms of teams is just sort of like the Alpine Renault situation, because they've been in this situation now for quite a long time, where they have just been kind of stuck outside of the top teams and just trapped in the upper midfield. I think since about 2018 or 2019, they've finished very comfortably fourth or fifth every year in the standings. And it's going to be interesting to see if that can change this year or maybe next, because it might be a bit of a problem with Fernando or Piastri or whatever comes of that.
They're an interesting team regarding the future, because like I don't see Alonso sticking for more than like a couple of seasons, and they definitely have Piastri ready to go. They actually, when Danny was sick, they reached an agreement with McLaren saying that like if you need a reserve driver, because I don't think McLaren have an active reserve right now, they could just call up Piastri. So they're like gearing up to put that kid in an F1 car. But contracts being what they are, and I still believe they want Ocon to stick around. They It's coming. The plan, our plan is I think it's there, but it's just a bit slow.
It definitely needs some work. It's not quite ready yet. Other things that aren't quite ready yet, David Croft, still consistently getting things wrong. Would he be David Croft if he didn't fuck up like drivers' names or literally anything else?
Brundle called Mick Schumacher Michael Schumacher
He
after
did
about
do that.
2
That was
laps.
pretty cringe.
Old man moment. Old man moment. The
Um,
other thing that wasn't too ready this weekend was the brand new graphics. We have a spanking new intro with all the drivers looking cool and moody in a sort of like room made of LED walls. That's nice. But we also have new graphics, which like the graphics themselves are fine, but just did not work for most of the weekend.
They have somehow managed to break the simplest part of the broadcast, the graphics package, which you would think they would just be able to overlay the front end, which isn't even that much different than what it was last season. They've just added a shitty transparent barrier around it. But no, it kept breaking, and it was really annoying. Nice one, Liberty Media, you geniuses.
Because it really looks like they slapped dash this like in the last few days before the race. It's quite funny that they can fuck this up despite the fact that they got a bunch of new money coming into the sport after crypto.com and Saudi Aramco, two of the best companies you can think of. They announced that Lenovo is now a partner, which is, I guess, fine. They also announced AlphaTauri is now the official
luxury clothing
partner.
sponsor, yeah. So
Yeah.
I don't know how that works. I don't know how they're going to do it. I don't know why F1 needs an official luxury clothing sponsor, but I mean, it's a rich boy sport. It makes sense.
I saw an AlphaTauri shop for the first time ever in real life a couple of weeks ago, and I was astounded. Uh, I was like, "Whoa! It's real. It's not just like rich energy."
And the other new sponsors, which is like hilarious, is MSC Cruises. So I guess you can see a lot of businesses that are going to go extinct in the next few years are now the official partners of F1.
I actually
That's
think
fun.
the cruise sponsor makes a lot of sense. I mean, these cars are fucking yachts, So why not bring in some boat sponsors, just to emphasize that we are the biggest sport in the world, literally.
They're
Yeah.
gonna do a cruise with like Crofty and Brundle and we all gonna go.
I would love to see, like, even if it was just like as a joke, like a sort of mini regatta between all the drivers. See how well that works.
Yes, to get a side series to get extra points. They have a regatta and they do a fucking football match. It would be unbelievable. The F1 mini challenges.
all in Miami, of course. Speaking of Miami and crypto and all that stuff, in F2 this weekend, so we've had we mentioned Logan Sargent doing well. My own kids, Theo Porcher, Isaac Ajar, and Martins got wins in their respective junior series. So the next generation of French drivers are here, and I'm psyched for it. But
There was shenanigans.
yeah, first of all, Ralph Bushung showed up in a car covered with crypto memes. And it's the worst livery ever. It's like NASCAR bad times 5. And then, yeah, the other big shenanigans was in the feature race towards the end. I think it was during a safety car. An absolute comedy of errors during pit stops. That's so Dennis Auger, one of the favorites for this year, I think, retire because, well, his team didn't put up the tire properly. So we just had like release and then a wheel just going off. And we've had the Williams, funny names considering, just stuck in the pit lane at the same time.
Yeah, Kellen Williams. It was hilarious because they have this image of Dennis Hogger. They have the camera above the pit lane on the wire track, and you see Hogger just jet off, and then immediately his wool comes off, and then after that they immediately cut further down the pit lane to a stationary camera on the ground, and you just see Kellen Williams just completely blocking the pit road, and
And
Hogger in the background.
Auger was fighting for the top 10, so some points, some little points put their new gyros. Oh!
No! And it's happened further down the pit lane. Absolutely extraordinary. So the flurry of action down in the pit lane with the safety car being called out to the racetrack, and extraordinarily, even by F2 standards, we've got 2 cars with 3 wheels attached in the pit lane.
The other thing about Auger that was hilarious is that they were doing a double stack. Like, Derivla showed up right after Auger, so they had to push Auger's car out of the way to do Derivla's pit stop. So absolute shambles. Quite funny moment. If you can watch it on YouTube, go for it. It's very fun.
It was very funny. I think I had actually just tuned in as it happened, and it was it was very funny. It was just it's the type of sort of what once in a blue moon like catastrophe happening that really just kind of enlightens your day, especially after you've had your day ruined by looking at the fucking Bitcoin car the entire time. You know, it's a shame that didn't evaporate, but you know, it is what it is.
Yeah, it is what it is. So, anything else, gentlemen? Because I believe that is it.
I think I'm pretty much done. I've got nothing else to talk about.
Yeah.
All right. Well, that's been our first episode of Sandbaggers in probably about 7 months now. This is going to become much more regular as we go through our first full season.
We have a schedule. Now. Let's see how long we can keep to it, but we have one.
A schedule. It's not just like every 3 months. Oh, hey, you guys want to do a podcast recording? It's like, sure, fine, yeah. But we will be back much sooner than we were last time. Until next time, I have been John Reed.
Auf
I've been
Wiedersehen.
worried. Carl, do your outro.
I said Auf Wiedersehen. Oh, goodbye, everybody. My name's Anthony. So I say goodbye.
Au revoir, as we say.
Arrivederci.
Si. Grazie ragazzi.
It's just shitting itself.
Yeah, copy, Max.